Live from the Democratic National Convention, this is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. We are broadcasting from Media Row in the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. The most notable job of the delegates at this convention is to formally nominate their presidential candidate. But there is other business at hand that affects issues that are important to Native Americans. It's partly the job of delegates to make sure Native people and their issues are included in the party platform that guides advocacy for policy. Today we'll dig into the work being done here at the convention and the Native voices in that process. Traditionally, there are more Native Americans supporting Democrats than Republicans. We'll talk about why that is and whether Democrats can take Native votes for granted. We have experts on that topic on today's show. We also want to hear from our listeners who are tuning in from communities across Indian country. Give us a call to share your insights and perspectives at 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Give us a call, share your thoughts, share your comments, share your questions on the air. Joining us here now at the United Center in Chicago is Isaac Casados. He is the secretary of the New Mexico Democratic Party and a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. He is Diné. He's been on the show before. Isaac, welcome back.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's great to see our Native voices represented here in Chicago this upcoming week.
It really is. And seated next to Isaac, we have Dwayne Duffy. He is a delegate from New Mexico and also the vice president of the Mescalero Apache tribe. Vice President Duffy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show as well.
Well, thank you for giving us the time and the opportunity. You know, the experience here at the DNC is amazing. I wish more of our Native people get to experience, come here, experience what goes on here. And, this is my first time as a delegate, first time at a convention. And so far, it's been amazing. Last night one of the convention, just to hear the speeches, it was very awe-inspiring and definitely galvanized the crowd to move forward to win this election.
I heard it was a little bit of a challenge getting out of here. There were so many people.
Oh, yes. I think we stood in line for about 40 minutes before we finally got on the bus and then started going back. I think the transportation situation between the United Center and our hotels, the McCormick Place and our hotels, there needs to be some work done there. But, like all things, the first day is always the worst. So hopefully it just gets easier from here.
Yeah, they'll get it figured out. And also joining us here all week at the DNC is none other than Sean Griswold. He's editor for Source New Mexico and our Native Vote 2024 convention correspondent. He is here with us on site. Good morning, Sean. Welcome back to NEC. Always a pleasure, bro.
Good morning. So happy to be here.
Well, let's get into it here. And Isaac, I want to start with you. Last night, there were some pretty heavy hitters from the Democratic Party that spoke. Vice President Kamala Harris, she made a surprise appearance. Hillary Clinton. And, of course, the evening culminated with President Joe Biden. And they appear to project a united front. But, geez, it was only a month ago. There was this big switch in the party. A new candidate steps in. President Biden ousted under pressure. It really does beg the question, just how united is the party right now?
I haven't seen anything like this probably since President Obama took office and ran for his office. I have not seen states and delegates and individuals across from rural to urban to tribal excited about an election. I know when I was last on here when we were looking at the RNC convention and everybody had a different calculation as to where this election was going. I think everybody really underestimated the vice president and her power and the star power that she brought to this ticket. And you have people that are fired up. You have people that are giving money for the first time. 800,000 people helped contribute over $300 million to her campaign. You see people registering at record numbers in New Mexico and all southern Sunbelt areas. You see areas of the Rust Belt where people are getting involved. 5,000 volunteers in various states that are signing up all across the country whenever they're going to rallies. And these are people who are either former Trump supporters, these are independent voters, these are Democrats that, hey, maybe weren't willing to get off the couch, as they say, but now they're getting involved in the process, and that's so important and something that's really exciting to see.
Vice President Duffy, down in Mescalero, what are you hearing from the community in terms of support for the Harris-Walz ticket?
So, in Mescalero, we just kind of went through a major natural disaster down there. We had two major wildfires. Now we're dealing with flooding. And so the people are trying to adjust out of that mode of responding to those emergencies and start to get back to some normalcy on the reservation, back to their normal lives. And so we did have a general meeting, I want to say about 3 weeks ago, had an open conversation. And I got up and I talked about the necessity to register to vote if you haven't been registered already, to get out there, to cast your ballot, to make your voice heard. And just to see the feedback from the tribal membership that was there, you could see that they're passionate, they're on fire, they're ready to help the Harris Walls campaign win this election. And like you said, most Native Americans, we tend to be Democrats, and that's for a number of reasons. And just to see the passion and the excitement that was in the room there, I think we're going to have a good turnout from Mescalero.
Now, for people that come to the convention, it's just over the top. There's lights, there's cameras, there's celebrities, there's huge throngs of people, there's media everywhere. Really exciting, the big name speakers during the evening. But during the day, there's a lot of maneuvering, a lot of caucuses and meetings. And if you could walk us through what a typical day is like for a delegate here at the convention.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is there's very little sleep. So the minute you fly in, it's program and caucus meetings and breakfasts that start either at 7:30 in the morning, and you're beginning to see that star power even showing up at that hour. This morning we had Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer join us for breakfast, and she was excited because we had Alaska join us for our breakfast, and it was exciting to hear her talk. I mean, all of us, of course, were out late last night. But at 7 o'clock, people are excited. People are showing up. People are there ready to hear these individuals. So you'll normally have delegates do their delegation breakfast with all their various states. After that, we typically break and then go into caucus and committee meetings. So McCormick Place, which is across the city, is now hosting those caucus meetings. So from the LGBTQ caucus and Native caucus and Women's caucus. And you're going to see some of those big heavy hitters that are actually speaking at that venue and site. And right after those caucus events, you'll start to see some of the receptions kind of kick up in the early afternoon. And probably by 3:30, 4 o'clock, people start making their way to the United Center. As you talked about last night, it was a very difficult process. The patience is a virtue statement really came in last night. It took us probably about 2 hours to get into the United Center last night. But you know what? Once we were in, it was just a dynamic atmosphere. So that's kind of what delegates have to deal with, and we're always having to be amenable to our schedules changing, and that's the exciting part of being at a convention.
And are you meeting a lot of other Native delegates? And if so, what are they saying?
Having that opportunity to meet the Native delegates here and just to hear them, I think the big thing that we have in common when it comes to us as Native people is the fear of Project 2025 being implemented if there is a second Trump term, and just the devastating effects it'll have on tribal sovereignty, programs that serve our reservations, our communities. We can't afford that second Trump term. We cannot afford Project 2025 to be implemented, because when you have language in there that says if it's in the national interest, the best interest of the country, the federal government then has a right to come in and seize federal lands, federal trust lands, and there's no talk about compensation for that. So that's our reservations. That's the oil we have on our reservations, the minerals, uranium. These things that are detrimental to the environment, it all opens the door. And so, you talk to tribal leaders, this is what, we're concerned about. We have to galvanize our communities to get out there to cast their votes to ensure that Project 2025 never gets implemented, that our tribes are never exposed to that kind of, dangerous activity.
All right, let's bring Sean Griswold into the conversation now. And Sean, key issues that the Democrats are really pushing are an improved economy, abortion rights, gun control, very pro-union support for the middle class. How much do those issues, do you think, really resonate among Native American voters?
I mean, you have to ask what Native American people want and care for and what we value, and it's about growth. It's about prospering with the life and liberty that I think all Americans want. And so as Native American people, as we just heard, it comes from also for who we are as culturally. We care about land. We care about, the promotion and the growth of our cultures, of our language, of our ceremonies. And so anything that can help us get there is what we want, and that can include access to healthcare, which is a major topic that we all need because we have to be healthy in order to live and sustain that lifestyle. But then the environmental impact. What does it mean for us to be able to balance the what I hear from Native people and Native leadership, especially, they're trying to understand the balance between building an economy that can support and sustain a society, a government, but also still being respectful for the land and our resources.
Now, you've been on the ground here for a couple of days already. You've already had a lot of meetings. You've met with a lot of sources. What's the buzz, Sean?
The buzz is exciting. Everybody is very excited. I think that when the ticket was shifted up to where we are right now, it changed so much more for the population, for Democrats, Republicans, everybody. There was a complete shift change that occurred that is real, and that's what we're sensing here. That's why I think everybody's excited. That's why it takes 2 hours to get inside.
Now, a month ago, we were at the RNC in Milwaukee. If somebody had told you a month ago that this would be the situation, Vice President Kamala Harris on the ticket with Tim Walz, would you have believed it?
I think people were very anxious about something like that happening and occurring, and the anxiety caused a lot of people to have all kinds of scenarios, as we all do with any type of anxiety. Inside Out 2, watch that movie. Great movie about anxiety. But once that happened, once we shifted up to where we are now, once the Democratic Party made that choice, a difficult choice, people started to realize, hey, actually, this could work. And I think something Isaac mentioned earlier about how the concern that Harris may have been, she may not have been able to do this or take on this role, is showing actually, in fact, it's way even bigger than we're creating new scenarios.
All right, we're going to take a short break here. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more with our guests, more about the issues. We're going to talk more about what's happening this week here at the convention. And we've got the phone lines open, so anybody who would like to call, if you are listening anywhere in Indian Country, let us know your thoughts. Maybe you know a delegate that's here this week. Maybe you yourself are heavily involved with the political process where you live. Call us, 1-800-99-NATIVE. In addition to the presidential race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, some congressional races are heating up in states like Montana, Arizona, and Mississippi. Native voters could make the next Native American Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. The Democratic National Convention is more than just a rally for the presidential candidate. There is business at hand. And we're learning about what that business is and how it affects our Native people and the issues that are important to us. You can join the conversation too if you'd like. Give us a call, 1-800-996-2848, 1-800-996-2848. You can also engage with us on social media, and this show today is being live streamed. So check it out at our NV1 YouTube channel or our Native America Calling Facebook page. Interact with us that way as well. Seated next to me today is Isaac Casados. He is the Secretary for the New Mexico Democratic Party. We also have Vice President of the Mescalero Apache Tribe, Dwayne Duffy, and our correspondent for the convention, Sean Griswold. And Isaac, you're going to be giving a speech for Latino Democrats later this week, and there are a number of polls showing Republicans gaining ground with Latino voters. What do you say to them to win more Latinos over to the Democratic Party? And what's the connection between Native voters and Latino voters?
You know, that's a great question. I think Sean alluded to it. We have a lot of shared opportunity. I think everybody's looking at business development. Everybody's looking at education. Everybody is looking at the basics from healthcare to early childhood access, looking at how do we lower the cost of collagens across the board. We've seen critical investments in tech areas with the Chips and Sciences Act. You see infrastructure as an area where our more traditional Hispanic and Latino communities have crumbling infrastructure just like tribal communities. And so when we talk to these folks, it's talking about where are the investments being made and who's made those investments. I think when I was on last time, we've seen record numbers of investments by this administration. Both the current president and now the potential upcoming president of the United States, Vice President Harris. And that's incredible because we've not really seen that type of engagement since the Truman administration. So my speech is really going to focus in on the infrastructure opportunities that have been created under the Biden administration and how we as not only Native individuals but also minorities need to step up to the plate. We always talk about the issue of non-engagement from the federal government. We also talk about the issues that sometimes we don't always agree or have trust in the federal government. And it's always important to demand or ask for a seat at the table. That's the first thing. The second thing is always making sure that if we don't get involved in that process, then our voice isn't going to matter. So that's what I'm really going to be talking on is how do we as minority individuals bring ourselves, and guess what? If the seat's not made, you bring your own chair.
Right.
And that's the most important part.
Well, how closely are Native Democrats working with other minority groups within the party, not just Latinos, but other groups? Is there a lot of synergy right now?
Exactly. So in the state of New Mexico, we have a number of our caucuses from the Hispanic Caucus, Fuerzas Unidas, you have the Native Caucus, and they're constantly coordinating amongst themselves on how we address GOTV efforts, so get out the vote initiatives amongst our individuals. You will also see your House caucus and your Senate caucus within the state legislature that's doing the exact same thing. So those members from various bodies are finding ways that they can help support another member that may not specifically be in their district or may be threatened by a upcoming general election candidate, how they can help get those people reelected. So a lot of synergistic opportunities are kind of coming about, but you see that not only within our state but nationally, from NALEO to LULAC to NCAI. They're all coordinating together on how they get out the vote and how they can maximize their dollars to pull voters in so that they understand the issues and make sure on election day or leading up to it that they get those people out to the polls.
All right. Vice President Duffy, I was at Santa Fe Indian Market over the weekend. We did a live show on Friday from the plaza. And on Saturday afternoon, I was walking around meeting just different vendors. And I sat down at one point and had a long conversation with a Navajo elder. He's a silversmith there at Market. And I said, I'm going to the convention this week, and it's just so easy to kind of get bogged down in questions about policy and legislature. And what should I be asking? What should I be asking anybody who I interview, delegates or potential political candidates? And he said, you really want to focus on the environment. You want to focus on the climate, and you want to focus on connecting us as Native people to our roots, right? And he said, we have this tradition of living in harmony, living a healthy lifestyle in mind and body. And he said, some of these politicians, they just tell people whatever they think they want to hear. And he said, you really want to focus and make people understand we've got to get back to that balance that we once had as Native people. What's your thought on that, Vice President?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Every time we go to D.C., our job, part of our job as tribal leaders is to educate those that sit within Congress, those that, run the federal agencies, and educate them on where we come from as Native people. I think a lot of people, they don't realize that when it comes to Western religions, you're taught to go forth and conquer the land and, make it bend to your will. While we as indigenous people, Native people, we're taught to live in harmony, that, we can't do damage to one thing and expect to thrive, that we have to find that balance. And Trying to get people to understand, especially in DC. One of the things that I am proud of on the Mescalero Reservation is that we have an awesome forest management plan there. Understanding that a healthy forest are the forests that don't exist today. Healthy forests, back in the day, they were managed by our ancestors. Fire was a natural part of the ecosystem, and we've completely eliminated that. We've allowed these forests to get overgrown, and trying to get our lawmakers to understand, if you want healthy forests, you have to have thinning. There has to be logging. There has to be control burning. All of this plays into creating a healthy and sustainable environment, having access to clean drinking water, knowing that if you're going to put a mine or oil or gas fields north of a reservation, north of a community, and that water is going to run through it, you're exposing these people to toxins, to cancer-causing substances. And we as Native people, for a few years now, we've been saying water is life, and it's so true. You cannot expect to thrive, to live life without water. That's a huge part of it. We talk about the effects of climate change, and we're seeing it. It's getting warmer every year. We're experiencing longer periods of drought, and it's making it harder for our communities to thrive. We talk about trying to diversify and expand our economies. Agribusiness is a way for us to do that. But if you don't have the water to do that, you don't have good clean air to do that, it's not going to be a viable option. And so focusing in on the environment and getting people to remember and realize that, we're not there to conquer. We're not there to bend anything to our will. We have to live in harmony with everything around us.
And Vice President, not only you are delegate, but of course you are also an elected leader. And compare what it's like running there at the Mescalero Apache tribe, running for the position of Vice President, as opposed to what we see here, running for national office, these big platform political positions. Do you see any similarities in terms of how you actually go about creating a campaign message and going out and getting votes?
So I think, for me, the issues that we face on our reservations and the issues that other minorities are facing within their communities, they're very similar. When you talk about the crumbling infrastructure, the lack of access to safe schools, these aren't red problems. They're not blue problems. These are just human problems, and you see it on and off the reservation. And so, of course, when you're back at home and you're in campaign mode on the reservation, our communities tend to be very small. So it's a very personal message. Like, I understand, where you're living from, your living conditions. I'm going to do what I can to leverage federal resources, private resources, to get new homes built, to ensure that, our infrastructure going to the ground. And, one thing we talk about is trust responsibility. And any tribal leader who's held any position in tribal leadership and gone to Washington, D.C., you talk about that trust and responsibility. And sometimes it's like you're just saying words and it doesn't mean anything anymore. And so it gets very frustrating. And so trying to get especially our older people, that, yes, there's that trust responsibility, but if we're going to exercise true sovereignty, we have to learn how to stand on our own 2 feet. That means building new businesses, diversifying our businesses, and ensuring that our people are getting educated, that they're going to, going into the workforce. And when I say educated, I don't just mean getting a bachelor's degree, going to a university. There's a lot of jobs out there in the trades, and our people tend to work very very good with their hands. And so getting them, finding them a job that they like, knowing that they're going to thrive, that's what we want as tribal leaders. And so when I ran for an SEC position within the Democratic Party, I just had to upsize that whole message to a bigger audience, and get them to realize that, yes, we live on a reservation, but our issues are just the same.
Is this an election year for you, or when are you up for re-election?
So I am actually up for re-election next year.
All right.
And I'm not campaigning yet.
Okay. Isaac, I want to ask you, because as Native people over the last few years, we've really focused a lot of attention on the historic appointment of Secretary of the Department of Interior, Deb Haaland. And but I just keep asking myself, like why stop there? Why do we limit ourselves just to DOI? And what's your thought on the possibility, should Kamala Harris win the election in November, of more high-profile Native American appointments? I mean, I don't see why we couldn't have a Native American Secretary of Education, a surgeon general, even a Native American person running the FBI or some other, high profile federal law enforcement agency?
That's a great question. We do have a number of individuals. I mean, you have Brian Nealon, who's at Bureau of Indian Affairs. You have Assistant Secretary Orlando Teller, who's at the U.S. Department of Transportation. You have Morgan Rodman, who's at the White House. So we do have a good group of Native Americans who are already in the administration. But, cabinet levels are one thing, but I think we need to set our sights a little bit higher. I think Native individuals need to be able to ask Kamala to make a commitment that we see the first Native American Supreme Court justice. We need representation at all levels, from the judicial to the executive, all the way to the legislative branch. We're making efforts and strides, and other people will talk about what we're doing to get more Natives to become federally elected within our legislative body. We're seeing that representation at the executive, but the judiciary is really lacking, and we need that opportunity. And those are the things that I think you're going to see within this administration. If she mirrors exactly what our president has done by having one of the most diverse cabinets probably in history, you're probably going to see the vice president, when she becomes president, do the exact same thing.
All right. I want to bring another guest into the conversation now. Joining us here at the booth is Clara Pratte. She is the CEO of Strongbow Strategies and the Democratic National Committee Native American Caucus Chair. She's Navajo. She's also been on Native America Calling many times. Clara, good morning, good afternoon,
Morning,
welcome back.
Afternoon, whatever it is. Good afternoon, morning. It's nice to be in person. We're usually on the phone.
I know, and I'm caught in time zones. I can't remember what time of day it is, but yeah, no, it's great to have you here. And let's talk a little bit about last night. I mean, we already mentioned there were some big names speaking. Among them was Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, who is, of course, White Earth Ojibwe. And even more exciting, she was named co-chair of the DNC, which is like super epic. And what else did we hear yesterday that speaks specifically to Native Americans there on the convention floor?
I think we heard a commitment to all of our issues that we deal with. We heard a commitment to protecting our sovereignty, our body sovereignty, particularly as women. We also, with seeing Lieutenant Governor Flanagan there on the stage, I think it's not lost on us as tribal people how far we've come in political representation within the party system. It would be almost unheard of, even 10 years ago. You just wouldn't see that level of representation. And at our Native Caucus meeting yesterday, initially we had a smaller room because they base it on numbers of folks that are active in the caucus. And the overwhelming response and registrations that we received, they were like, we need to move you to a bigger room. And they did. And I remember attending my first Native council meeting before we were a caucus. And there were maybe 15 of us in the room. And this was in Charlotte. And to look at that room of, hundreds of Native people sitting in that room cheering Governor Walz, it was just, not a dry eye. People were like tearing up and getting so excited. And so last night was just a further extension of that as they talked about all of the issues that we hold so important in our tribal communities.
Well, let's talk more about these Native American caucus meetings. There was, of course, the one yesterday, and there's another one coming up tomorrow. And give us an insider view in terms of what those meetings are all about and what to expect for tomorrow's.
Sure. So the insider view is really you want to get folks, you want to kind of balance, right? You want really good content so that people walk away feeling like they have something of value. So we had a couple of panels yesterday, one on Native voting and organizing, one on how you get involved with the Emerge program and specifically, and how do we get more Native representation, exactly what Isaac was saying. How do we get more people running for these offices, right? And a lot of us, we see it and we're like, oh, I can't do it. I don't have the resources. I don't have the money. I don't have the know-how. So it's really demystifying that. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter, if you're looking at that checking balance and you're like, oh, can I afford Starbucks today or not? The situation so many of us are in. There are resources here. If you want to run for public office, there are ways that we can do it. And I think, there's that balance. And then there's also, you want the balance of big name speakers to come out and get everybody excited. And you also want to signal to the world our tribal communities are important. We deserve to get a visit from Governor Walz. We deserve to get a visit from Senator Booker. So, tomorrow is going to be very similar, a balancing of content and a balancing of getting people excited, and also a signal to everybody within the party and out there watching in the United States. Look at what we're able to do. Look at the names we're drawing to our events.
All right. In addition to the Native American caucuses, there was also a women's caucus this morning. And Sean, you were in attendance there. Tell us what that was like and how it resonated with Native voters.
I think, well, for Native voters, it comes back to what we just mentioned earlier, body autonomy, and it's the rights that we have as individuals, and the rights that women are trying to regain back that have been lost over the past several years. And so it goes back to the energy that we were discussing earlier. It goes back to who is organizing the party, who's at the top of the ticket. It's Kamala Harris, and the people that are below her are all people who are empowered by Harris on the top of the ticket and are operating and maneuvering in a whole new way. So the energy there, just the opportunity, viewing the energy that we can actually, the people that are telling us this in the room that are saying we actually have power, we can organize, we can move, we can create and make real change, is coming to a lot of people, like they're understanding it. And that's what I viewed from that. Are you seeing that as well too, with a lot of organizers now, and organizers who are non-traditional organizers, correct?
Yes, I think that's so true. And I think a lot of times we face this apathy in voting communities, particularly in voting communities of color, and even more so in our tribal communities, where it's like, why am I going to do that? Why? So we still, we still have low voter turnout in a lot of our elections. And my thought is this: if this is us doing half, what power do we harness if we go all the way? And you look at some of these margins in key battleground states, and Governor Walz brought it up today. He said, or yesterday, he said,
All right,
you guys want it.
we're going to have to take a short break. We'll come back. We've got more with Clara, Pratte, and our other guests here at Native America Calling.
Support by AA.
We are glad you were tuned in to Native America Calling. We are live from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, Illinois. We are in Media Row at the United Center, and we've got a caller on the line, Big Brother Chanupa, who joins us from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. He's listening on Keeley Radio. Hello, Big Brother. How you doing today?
I want to say a good shot to Samilas for her deal on the thing. But what I want to say for the Native people is this thing, okay? My grandpa said it this way, and I'm going to say it real busy. This is for my brother. Konkata ke le woak shapi ke hina oispo. Na oyate ke taku ichunk te hanta, taku lena ichumpi. So, woyuk chanke hina ayin ke hanta, taku lena kashabia iyankte. That's what's going to happen to us. And Chamala, I want to tell you, keep that forward going on. Keep doing it. I'm listening to that red time committee of all the things going on. I'm seeing it all with that. So thank you, big brother. Thank you for hearing our chance on the show. So have a good one, man, brother.
All right, Chanupo, big brother, thank you for calling in there. Appreciate your warm words. And Clara, what states have the largest number of native delegates here?
Oh my gosh, so we've got Arizona, Dakotas, Nevada, New Mexico. Those are the ones with the biggest, the largest native delegates in their not their caucuses, but in their numbers of delegates.
Hmm. And here, I mean, natives do traditionally lean towards the Democratic Party, but of course, in Congress right now, there are more native Republicans than there are native Democrats. So, what are you folks looking to do to change those numbers going forward?
Absolutely, and I would say that native issues, by and large, I can say this as a reformed advocate slash lobbyist, but native issues are really bipartisan issues. We need people on both sides of the aisle. Now, as a Democrat, one of the things that I believe firmly in is that the Democratic Party continues to strive to a more perfect relationship and union with Native people, and that is one I see as a very big difference, in my opinion. And both parties have the power to do that. But you see one party that actually is making policy, long-standing policy, to acknowledge what has occurred in the past, to look it in the face for as ugly as it is, and say, how do we fix it, versus glossing over it. And one party has put resources and has put their money where their mouth is by investing billions of dollars in much-needed infrastructure, broadband, water, transportation.
And how do you go to work in states that have large Native American populations, but also a strong Republican Party presence? I'm thinking Oklahoma, I'm thinking Arizona, I'm thinking Montana. What are you going to do there to gain that support for the Democratic Party?
Absolutely, and I think there's this intersectionality in those states of also faith and religion. And one of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind, as we work in these states, is that Native people are not a monolith, right? We have traditional people, we have Christians, we have all sorts of viewpoints coming into play, but we need to speak to the policy. How is life going to be better by how you cast your vote tomorrow? How are you protecting the rights of your children, your daughters? How are you protecting sovereignty? And when we look at the policies and we look at the wins that Democrats have delivered, there really is no question which is the better party for Indian country.
All right. Sean, I see you there. Looks like you're ready to go. Jump in, ask her a question.
Oh, well, the question that was on my mind that I was thinking about is, we're at a point right now where we're not only going to see new leadership and step into these roles, and we were talking along the threads of people feeling more empowered to take on these roles, and I bring this back to Deb Haaland. And before she wrote, before she became a chapter in the history books, she was just a New Mexican, just a person from Laguna Pueblo. So who is that person here at the convention right now?
Oh my gosh, it could be an Isaac. It could be, Vice President Duffy. I think we all have an obligation to stand up and serve and do that call. My good friend, Jonathan Nez, who's running for Congress in Arizona. It's a Jonathan Nez. And we're seeing people who are tired of the nonsense of the extreme right, even Republicans. We saw some of those speakers last night say, I'm a Republican. I'm a first-time Democrat voter, and I'm voting for Harris Waltz. And I've seen that in the state for state legislatures, for House and Senate.
Yeah.
Well, Native voters, oftentimes we frame a lot of these discussions around topics like sovereignty and the trust responsibility, but how much those really resonate, do you think, with the average Native American voter who might just be really concerned about how much they're paying for a gallon of gas? And especially now with well over 50% of Native American people not living on tribal lands. They make up a huge, significant portion of our population. And how do you connect with those voters as well?
You have to connect it to very specific items, right? For me, personally, I grew up in Lupton, Arizona. Worked on this darn bridge replacement in my community for many, many years. It was always getting washed out. My uncle Alfred had a heart attack and had to lost several minutes getting the critical care he needed. Thank God he survived. But that bridge was replaced as a direct result of a Biden-Harris administration. For the first time ever, Army Corps funded that, and that's replaced. And so you have to point it to things that people really see every day. Your IHS funding, your bridges, your HUD is a huge issue. We get dollars through HUD. How is that going to fund it? And you can't talk in like these broad strokes, like, recovery funds. You have to say, in our community, it did X, Y, and Z. And for our urban folks, in our communities, we've had huge investment into jobs, good union jobs in the state of Arizona. Many of those folks that are working to build up that infrastructure are our tribal people.
All right. Sean, let's talk about foreign policy. There is a pretty significant protest movement going on here at the convention as well, specifically with the administration's handling of the war in Gaza. How well do you think that issue resonates with Native voters?
Well, we want to talk about foreign policy. I think we have to understand that Native people is essentially foreign policy. We're dealing with multiple governments in a way within the country. Now, let's just broaden off of that, not get more specific to the issues with Gaza. For Native people that we talk to that are part of our stories, some are active in those movements. Some are active in the uncommitted movement, which is the delegation of people who are stating their protest vote. And stating that they want the administration to move forward on that policy to where they want it to go, which for right now is a ceasefire. And so the groups are organizing, they are protesting. They're outside of the convention. There's going to be some delegates here who are part of the uncommitted who are going to be on the floor, who I'm not sure exactly what they plan to do. But the presence is there, and that to me is part of why we're having these conversations here. This whole party is essentially how are we going to direct our platform going forward, and the issue on Gaza is something that is going to be significant for all Americans.
Isaac, how about you? What's your thought on foreign policy going forward?
Well, I think the conversation that we're hearing when we're meeting people in community, which I think is the most important part, is they're talking about education. They're talking about infrastructure. They're talking about jobs. Even though there are atrocities happening in Ukraine and in Gaza, we just saw a current poll that was done by Harvard University, and it rated it 19 out of 20 different issues that people were really focused in on. But we still have to have those valid conversations. As the president signaled last night, they are bringing up very important issues that we need to address. We're looking at how do we get to a ceasefire? How do we create a two-state solution for that region that has been warring with each other for centuries? How do we get to that point where we now start to see human beings, as our fellow contributor to our environment, our fellow contributor to our larger ecosystem? And that's going to take a longer time for us to get there. But I think the immediate need right now is how do we get that ceasefire? How do we get prisoners that are being held released? And how do we ensure that we have a two-state solution as quickly as possible so that we are now focused in on what do we need to do to continue to uplift our country? Because it really does dissuade us from the key issues that we need to focus in on here in this country. Because guess what? If we don't have a democracy or we don't have a solid foundation, we can't be that advocate for other individuals nationwide.
Do you see a difference? Should Kamala Harris win the election in November, do you see a shift in her foreign policy versus what we've seen with President Biden over the last few years?
I think she's already signaled that she's probably going to take a tougher stance. I think she's already signaled that she wants to see a ceasefire. She's already talked to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and has told him, listen, you need to come to some sort of resolution as quickly as possible. I think Clara and Sean would probably agree and probably state to that exact same point. But I think she's going to look at this from a different contextual lens, and that's good. That's exactly what we need to help resolve this issue.
I think what's going to be exciting out of understanding where that policy is going to move forward with, and I think that the change in the ticket gave us, again, the opportunity that, in fact, we can move this policy differently. So immediately there, that gave attention towards the topic and why we're still talking about it. But Sean, to your question originally, why do Native people care about this? We have experience with war and genocide from colonialism. We're still here dealing with that. So yeah, of course we do care about them when we're seeing that happening to other people.
Sean, you were here, well, of course, last month we were together at the RNC in Milwaukee. And how would you compare just the outreach and the effort to gain native votes there at the RNC versus what you've seen so far here at the Democratic National Convention?
I mean, there's natives here. Let's just say that, right? Clear and clear and present. Natives are here. There was a handful of native people at the Republican National Convention, but no, natives are not only here, they're present, we're active, we're leading caucus meetings, we're leading fundraising events. We're not only here, but we're active and we're in the leadership positions and getting more, it sounds like, and that is the major difference.
Now, we're still really just getting started. We're just barely into day 2. Clara, what do you have planned for the rest of the day, into the evening, tomorrow? What are you going to be most focused on?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where I'm at. Moment to moment, it feels like. So, for the rest of the day, we will be having some dialogue with tribal leaders later this afternoon, making sure the campaign folks know who the tribal leaders are, so that we're making those connections, and we're helping along with those those interactions. Like, you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to this person. And then, of course, tomorrow we have our next Native Caucus meeting. And then really, by and large, even though my title sounds fancy, I'm just to be of service. I want to make sure our Native folks and our Native leaders and our Native delegates, that they have what they need, that they're comfortable, they're getting access to the things they need. There's a million parties going on. We'll see. I'm just excited. I want people to have a good time. I want our Native folks to walk away from this event saying, I matter and my voice matters and I am included and I'm at the table. That's what my hope is.
All right. Now, last night, the evening ended with President Biden coming on stage, officially, of course, reaffirming his support for Kamala Harris. Some people saw it as the passing of the torch. Some people saw it as a time to honor the president. Other people saw it was kind of like, hey, they're just kind of shooing him out of the way. He's done. Now we're going to focus on Vice President Harris going forward. What did you think of his speech last night?
I thought it was what he is, which is just a selfless public servant and a selfless, wonderful human being, not just a good leader, but a good man. And I'll be honest, I was, when he first bowed out, I had so much conflicting emotion. I worked really, really hard in 2020 to get him elected. And we all did. Native folks came out to the table, and we love him. I mean, I love him, just as a person, as a human. So being able to see that, and it just is really indicative of how much he cares about his country versus his own ego. And I think that was just so moving, So it was, to me, a very appropriate passing of the baton to the vice president.
All right. Isaac, do you think we're going to see more of President Biden campaigning here in the next couple of months?
I already know he's going to get on the campaign trail. We already know he's going to Pennsylvania and starting to talk to those working class families. I think he's going to be, as he said last night, one of the biggest supporters he can to make sure that the vice president and Governor Walz are elected into their office, and that they assume the role in the White House and continue that good work that's already, and that foundation that's already been paved over the last 4 years. That's exciting, because never have we had a sitting president say, hey, I passed the torch, but you tell me what I need to do. Just like everybody else is fired up, so is he. And he's willing to do the work and get those people out and activated. And that's exciting us, because if he's willing to do it, we're going to stand behind him and do it just as well.
Okay, we have about a minute before we wrap up. I would like any of you to respond to this question. What do we know about where the campaign trail leads in the next 2 months across Indian country? What are some potential venues, communities that any of these candidates might visit?
Well, I can't specifically say what we know, but I can tell you this. This administration and this campaign have made commitments to touch and to engage with tribal leaders. And it's going to be very exciting in September and October to see where the vice president, where Governor Walz are going. And it'll be historic. That's all I'll say.
I just found out that there are a very large number of Native American voters in the state of North Carolina. And I have a residency in North Carolina. I own a home in North Carolina. And it really surprised me to find out over approximately 300,000 Native voters in North Carolina, but there's only one federally recognized tribe, one small reservation there in that state. What do you think it's going to take to win those votes, those Native votes, in a place like North Carolina that's a little bit maybe off the beaten path of what we think of as typical Indian country?
It takes resources and it takes people. It's a lot of boot leather, pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, which is really where the work happens. We knock on doors, we table, we register voters, we get people engaged, and that's what it's going to take. And I think in tribal communities specifically, you can run all the social media campaigns, you can send out all the emails, but until you sit down with those grandmas and grandpas and aunties and uncles and you shake hands and you have a cup of coffee and you share, those words together, that's what it's going to take.
All right, with that, I'm about ready to go grab myself a cup of coffee. Maybe we can all hang out a little bit later this afternoon, but we are going to have to wrap up the show for today. Big thanks to our guests, Clara Pratte, Isaac Casados, Vice President Dwayne Duffy, and of course, Sean Griswold, our convention correspondent, here live at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. Native America calling on site all week at the convention. We will, of course, be back tomorrow for the third day of the DNC. We'll go down the ballot and find out how Native issues might benefit or be weakened by Democrats in Congress. That's on the next Native America Calling. Please tune in, engage with us here at Native America Calling. I'm your host, Sean Spruce.